and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. The Monetary Policy Committee unanimously agrees to cut the repo rate by 25 basis points for the first time in nearly 5 years, maintains the neutral stance. Governor Sanjay Malhotra makes a pledge to ensure adequate liquidity in his debut policy. RBI trims its growth forecast for the current fiscal to 6.4% from 6.5%. Projects 6.7% growth rate in FY26, expects inflation to ease to 4.2% in the next FY. In a bid to provide liquidity cushion to banks, RBI delays the implementation of the new liquidity coverage ratio and project financing rules. The new LCR rules delayed at least till April 2026. The governor promises sufficient time frame for banks to avoid any disruption. The Sensex and the Nifty post minor gains for the second straight week. This, even as a roller coaster ride on Friday ends in the red. The rupee gains some lost ground against the dollar. Strong demand for SUVs and tractors aid M&M in Q3. The auto major reports an inline set of numbers. The management remains bullish about the agri sector, sees tractor industry growth at 7%. A dramatic twist in the battle to control Religare. The Supreme Court rules that the Berman family's open offer will not close today, directs the US investor Danny Gaikwad, who wants to make a counter-offer to deposit 600 crore rupees as the earnest money within 5 days. The apex court also pulls up SEBI, asks why shareholders are being forced to pay prices prevailing 18 months ago. SEBI cracks the whip on Finfluencer Asmita Patel after receiving over 40 complaints in pounds 54 crore rupees for running an unregistered investment advisory, unfair trade practices, mis-selling services, among others. Patel has more than 500,000 followers on YouTube. The US imposes sanctions on a number of entities and individuals for allegedly facilitating the shipment of Iranian oil to China. An Indian company named Marshall Ship Management among those blacklisted. The clampdown comes days after Donald Trump signed a memorandum sanctioning a maximum pressure campaign on arch-rival Iran. Congress leader Rahul Gandhi alleges irregularities in the Maharashtra elections, which saw BJP and allies win a commanding majority. Claims the number of people who voted is more than the state's adult population. The Election Commission promises a full factual response. The Union Cabinet is likely to take up the new income tax bill this evening. The legislation is likely to be introduced in Parliament next week. The global CEO of Nivea maker Biersdorf is betting big on India. Vincent Warnery says 2025 is India's year, hopes to double sales and make it one of the top 5 markets for the company. That's an exclusive. Well, the big story this evening, the Monetary Policy Committee of the Reserve Bank of India has unanimously cut the repo rate by 25 basis points for the first time in 5 years. In his debut policy decision, RBI Governor Sanjay Malhotra said the Monetary Policy Committee has also decided to keep the policy stance neutral, adding that such a stance will provide RBI the flexibility to respond to the environment. The central bank trimmed its growth forecast for the current fiscal to 6.4% from 6.5% earlier. For FY26, the RBI is projecting a growth rate of 6.7%. While warning about potential headwinds from geopolitical tensions and protectionist trade policies. The RBI is expecting inflation to ease to 4.2% in the next financial year. It's betting on a good Kharif season to drive food prices lower, and in a bid to provide liquidity cushion to banks, RBI delayed the implementation of the new liquidity coverage ratio as well as the project financing rules. Now, the new LCR rules have been delayed at least till April 2026, so almost a year of a reprieve there. And here's the RBI Governor Sanjay Malhotra speaking after his first monetary policy.
This growth inflation dynamics opens up policy space for the MPC to support growth while remaining focused on aligning inflation with the target. At the same time, the MPC felt that excessive volatility in global financial markets and continued uncertainties about global trade policies, coupled with adverse weather events, pose risks to the growth and inflation outlook. This calls for the MPC to remain watchful. Accordingly, it decided to continue with a neutral stance. It's more than 1 year. 2 months, less than 2 months is too short a window for the banks. We realize that. And so, we will give at least 31, at least. Doesn't mean it has to be 31/3/2026. We'll aspire for that, but we want to make it very smooth, and it will also be phased. It will not be, that all the regulations, all the norms kick in from day one, which will be at the earliest 31/3/2026. ECL was only a discussion paper. Even the draft is not out. So there is no time frame for implementation of ECL guidelines. Similarly, project finance, you can rest assured, I think they will need more time. 31/3/2026 is the earliest. For project finance, the draft regulations were certainly published. Comments have been received, suggestions have been received. We are examining them, and we'll come out with something. I want to assure all of you that which balances the interests of the public, the depositors, the financial stability, which is very, very important for our country, and at the same time, the concerns of the banks, keeping in mind the efficient use of resources.
Well, that's the RBI Governor Sanjay Malhotra. Lata is here with her take on the RBI's policy. Lata, so that 25 basis point cut coming in and the additional 1 year or perhaps even longer reprieve on the LCR as well as project financing norms.
Actually, I would say the policy clearly gets an A+, or whatever you want to call it, AAA+. And it's not just my opinion, that's the broad swathe of opinion. Primarily for its appropriateness. 25 basis was what the market expected, and the policy stopped over there, didn't try to be exuberant, especially in the way in which they handled liquidity. The policy said, both in the statement and the governor in his Q&A, said that we proactively will promise as much liquidity as required. He didn't say that I assure you surplus liquidity all the time. Anything extra can be used to short the rupee. So I think the appropriateness was very important. One, because the rupee is a little wobbly, and also because there is a lot of uncertainty. We don't know how things might go in terms of tariffs and make, items expensive. The best tribute to the policy came from the rupee. Normally, when you cut rates, the rupee falls. The rupee rose today. It is ending higher than where it ended yesterday. So that itself is a tribute that, the RBI went only as far as expected. The bond yields didn't move at all, actually. The 10-year bond yield remained at 6.69, 6.7, because that much of a cut was factored in. The important point is, as you pointed out, the postponement of those three regulatory measures, LCR, liquidity coverage ratio, expected credit loss accounting system, and higher provisioning for infrastructure, it was expected that they would defer. You don't have structural reforms, however robust, when there is a wartime. And, the way the rupee and the way the tariff war has kind of gotten sparked off, you don't try to do extraordinary things at such times. It was always expected. But the grace with which it was done should be appreciated. While the governor did say that, there is a cost involved in regulation in terms of efficiency, he quickly said that the Reserve Bank does take into account the cost. I'm only stating it up front. So there was a lot of grace that he extended to the Reserve Bank. And a takeaway for all of us, the creation of that bank.in domain name that will be attached to all messages from any bank. So it's like State Bank of India at bank.in. If you get messages from that, only that is not a fraud. Now, that is a very good innovation, I think, among the non-policy statements. And, well, it's coming from a computer engineer governor, so maybe he gets some brownie points for that. I also like the way in which he defended the flexible inflation targeting. It came out of nowhere. No governor does that because we take the flexible inflation target framework for granted, but probably because he's coming from the finance ministry and previous economic survey had said that maybe the target should exclude food, probably wanted to just remove all doubts, and saying upfront that it is a commendable job was, I think, a very generous and important statement to make, appropriate statement to make, confidence-generating statement. So all told, I would think the governor, by the way in which he quoted the weights of several items in the CPI, the jargon that he used, like, for instance, when he was asked about the rupee, from Bimal Jalan onwards, what do the governors say when you are asked about the rupee? The Reserve Bank intervenes to smooth out volatility. We have no target for the rupee. Repeated that sentence verbatim. So I think really mastered the skill in a very short time.
All right, Lata. Many thanks for joining us. That's the first policy being delivered under the watch of the new RBI Governor, Sanjay Malhotra. Now, earlier this week, the Financial Services Secretary M. Nagaraju spoke about the new LCR rules. He made the government's position clear. The government did not want money locked up, and that was the view that had been conveyed to the Reserve Bank of India. And it looks like the Finance Ministry's view has prevailed because, as we heard there from the RBI Governor, at least a year, if not more, for the banks to transition to the new rules. Take a look.
Not going to second guess the RBI, but RBI has issued the draft, and we have conveyed our views on that. Now they have not issued the final draft, the regulations. We want to more. We don't want to lock up a lot of capital into this kind of ideal situation. So we have expressed our views based on the feedback we received from the industry. Okay. Now the RBI has not issued. So let us put a full stop there.
Well, a full stop clearly, at least for the next year, has been put by the RBI on the LCR and the project financing rules. The rupee did regain some lost ground after monetary policy. The rupee gained about 15 paise against the dollar, but it remains above the 87 mark. The 10-year bond price is declining in trade and the yields hardened to 6.7%. That's the money market snapshot for you. In the stock markets, the Sensex and the Nifty managed to check out minor gains for the week. It was a roller coaster ride on Friday that ended with marginal losses. The Sensex lost about 200 points. The Nifty was down by about 40. The mid-cap index was up just about, and the bank Nifty closed about 0.5% lower. So that was the story as far as the stock markets were concerned. And in the commodity markets, oil prices up marginally, but remained on track for a third straight week of decline. This is US President Donald Trump's renewed trade war on China, and threats of tariff hikes on other countries weighed on sentiment. Trump's maiden sanctions package targeting a handful of vessels carrying Iranian oil has also put pressure on prices. In earnings corner, shares of M&M up in trade today after the company reported a good set of numbers for Q3, meeting street estimates on most fronts. Net profit up 21%, revenue up 20% on an annual basis. Sudarshan is standing by with the M&M report card. Sud.
It's a healthy set of earnings from the auto major Mahindra & Mahindra for Q3 FY25, led by healthy volume growth. Both the segments have seen healthy growth. Auto segment has seen volume growth of 16%, and tractor segment has reported volume growth of almost 20% in Q3. And because of this, revenue growth has increased 20%. Even EBITDA was healthy, and it has come at 4,468 crore against our estimate of 4,425 crore. Margin remains healthy. It has come at 14.6% versus 12.8% that company had reported in the same quarter last year. Talking about the segments for auto business, revenue was up 20% year-on-year, and on a sequential basis, it has increased by 6%, and margin has reached to 9.7% versus 8.5% in the same quarter last year. Agri-business revenue has increased 21% year-on-year, and on a sequential basis, it's up 26%. And for agri-business, EBIT margin has increased to 18.1% from 15% that company had reported in Q3 of FY24. Now, talking about the guidance, company says for agri-business, the growth is seen at 7% versus earlier guidance that company had given for industry that was in the range of 6 to 7%. For passenger vehicle, growth is seen in mid-single digit. Now, talking about the market share, in SUV, revenue market share is now at 23%, which is an increase of 200 basis points. For tractor, market share has increased to 44.2%. That is an increase of 240 basis points. And in electric three-wheeler, market share stands at 41.8%. So on earnings front, it's almost in line to slight beat for Q3 FY25. Even guidance, especially for tractor segment, is looking healthy by M&M.
Sid, many thanks for joining us. And more earnings. Ola Electric has reported a weak set of numbers for Q3. Losses for the quarter widened to 564 crore rupees on an annual basis. Revenue dropped more than 19%. Ola has also reported an EBITDA loss of 460 crore rupees on a yearly basis. The stock down today. We will take a break, but coming up next, SEBI cracks the whip on Finfluencer Asmita Patel after receiving over 40 complaints. More on that when we get back. Well, a dramatic twist in the battle to control Religare. The Supreme Court has ruled that the Berman family's open offer will not close today, directing US investor Danny Gaikwad, who wants to make a counter offer. He's been directed to now deposit 600 crore rupees as the earnest money within 5 days. The top court also pulled up the market regulator SEBI. Ashmit joins us now with more. Ashmit, take us to what the Supreme Court has said.
Well, the battle for control for Religare continues. Bear in mind that on one hand you have the Berman open offer. On the other hand, Digvijay Gaikwad, a little-known commodity, a US-based investor, looking to come in with his own open offer at a higher price. And importantly, Gaikwad had moved the top court, the highest court of the country. The entire issue about higher pricing being offered by Gaikwad, the approval process coming with a delay, all these issues were debated at length. And importantly, the long and short is the Supreme Court has passed an interim order, and that order has 4 important elements. Number one, Gaikwad, to show his bona fides, will have to deposit an earnest money of 600 crore rupees by February 12th, and that is Tuesday of next week. So that's part one. The second is Berman open offer, which was expected to close today. The tendering process closes today, will not happen. That's element number 2. The third key element here is the Supreme Court is directing that until the earnest money deadline, which is of February 12th, the Berman open offer will remain open till that date. And subject to, if Gaikwad does bring in the money of 600 crore rupees, what happens in that case? Well, the Supreme Court has accounted for that, has passed the 4th direction, which is that if Gaikwad brings in the money, then until SEBI decides on Gaikwad's application, the Berman open offer will remain open. So again, that confusion, that question mark still remains. But there are important observations to also keep in mind. Number one, the Supreme Court observing that this entire open offer being conducted by the Bermans is being done at their own risk, that tomorrow if this issue gets decided in favor of Gaikwad, they'll have to, number one, cough up a lot of money. And number two, the observation that the Supreme Court made, and this was something where they were critical of SEBI, saying that this open offer was publicly announced at 235 rupees a share by the Bermans in September of 2023, which is 18 months back. What Supreme Court opined is that effectively SEBI is asking shareholders to pay a price that existed 18 months back in September of 2023. And this is something the Supreme Court said SEBI should be more mindful of, should be more careful of.
All right, Ashmit, appreciate you joining us. Now, the regulator, SEBI, has cracked the whip on Finfluencer Asmita Patel. After receiving over 40 complaints, it's issued an interim order to impound over 53 crore rupees for running an unregistered investment advisory, also for unfair trade practices, mis-selling services, among others. Patel has more than 500,000 followers on YouTube. Yash is here with the details. Yash, a significant order there coming in from the regulator.
Well, Shireen, significant order, and just last week we had the FAQs which were released by SEBI when it comes to Finfluencer and unregistered entities and the relation with SEBI registered entities. And here, the very next week, we have an order against one of the influencers, Asmita Patel. She was popularly known as the She-Wolf, or the options queen on social media circles. As far as SEBI's order is concerned, it's an interim order and a show cause notice against Asmita Patel and Asmita Patel Global School of Trading, along with 4 other proprietary entities. Now, this order was passed after 42 complainants, reached out to SEBI with their complaints of being cheated in terms of buying a course from Asmita Patel. And all of them had registered for this particular course, where they were asked to pay about 8.26 lakh with GST per person for a course. As far as SEBI's allegations are concerned, it is with respect to unregistered investment advisory and research analyst service, violation of fraudulent and unfair trade practices, which is known as PFUTP regulations, defraud in connection with dealing in securities market, and mis-selling of services related to securities market. You spoke about the followers she had. Quite a wide and a popular following. YouTube about 5.26 lakh, Instagram about 2.9 lakh, Facebook 73,000, LinkedIn about 1,900, as well as Twitter about 4,200. The order is essentially asking Asmita Patel to disgorge an amount of 54 crore rupees as unlawful gains. The show cause notice takes it a step ahead, asking Asmita Patel to justify why she shouldn't be asked to disgorge an amount of 104 crore rupees, which is the entire illegitimate gain which she's made by selling these courses, as I said, being charged at about 8.26 lakh per person, spanning across 7 months.
Well, that's a significant order there that's coming in from the regulator, SEBI. Yash, many thanks for joining us. And with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. The news will continue on CNBC TV 18. Stay right there. We're back in a moment with more.